And then she said, stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself. And I'm like, I'm not hitting. Why are you doing this to me? You're mean. And that's how my evening has gone. How about you, Internet? Hello. I live with mean people.
Excuse me?
So mean to me.
Excuse?
This is the face of abuse. This is the face of victimization right here.
Don't even play that with me right now.
I am the victim of abuse. Verbal, physical, and psychological.
You would like to be physically abused.
I mean, by you, but that's different. Anyway, we're going to move right on to chapter 17. I think this video just became not appropriate for children when I posted on YouTube. Thanks, babe. Appreciate your help there.
I'm not the one that said anything inappropriate.
You said that I wanted to be abused.
You said it.
No,
Yes.
that's literally what she said.
Yes, that's exactly what she said.
Okay, now we're going to read chapter 17 of Rinkitink and Oz before these abusers over here
I'm not an abuser.
push me any further. Chapter 17 is entitled The Nome King. And I remember last night when I saw that the title of chapter 17 was... Are we done? Awesome. I remember last night when I saw that the title of chapter 17 was The Nome King, I said, oh yeah, I wonder if it's still Calico. And if it is, I should probably go remember what Calico's voice sounds like. And did I do it?
No.
I did not. So we're in for an adventure. Hooray. Let's see how this goes. Probably poorly. My wife is laughing at me. She's abusive. Chapter 17. Chapter 17, The Nome King. The kingdom of the gnomes does not border on the Nonestic Ocean, from which it is separated by the kingdom of Rinkitink and the country of the Wheelers, which is a part of the land of Ev. I remember that from the third book in the Oz series, I think. That's from Ozma of Oz, I think. Rinkitink's country is separated from the country of the gnomes by a row of high and steep mountains, from which it extends to the sea. The country of the Wheelers is a sandy waste that is open on one side to the Nonestic Ocean, and on the other side has no barrier to separate it from the gnome country. Therefore it was on the coast of the Wheelers that the King Goose landed, in a spot quite deserted by any of the curious inhabitants of that country. Good, because I don't remember what the Wheelers sound like either. The gnome country is very large in extent, and is only separated from the land of Oz on its eastern border by a deadly desert, that cannot be crossed by mortals unless they are aided by the fairies or by magic. The gnomes are a numerous and mischievous people, living in underground caverns of wide extent, connected one with another by arches and passages. The word gnome means one who knows. And these people are so called because they know where all the gold and silver and precious stones are hidden in the earth, a knowledge that no other living creatures share with them. The gnomes are busy people, constantly digging up gold in one place and taking it to another place where they secretly bury it. And perhaps this is the reason they alone know where to find it. The gnomes were ruled at the time of which I write by a king named Calico. There it is. Okay, it is Calico. I was really hoping it was a new guy, so I didn't have to try to remember the old voice. But it's the same guy, so I'm going to try to remember the same voice. King Goose had expected to be pursued by Inga in his magic boat, so he made all the haste possible, urging his 40 rowers to their best efforts, night and day. To his joy, he was not overtaken, but landed on the sandy beach of the Wheelers on the morning of the 8th day. The 40 rowers were left with the boat, while Queen Cor and King Goose, with their royal prisoners, who were still chained, began their journey to the Nome King. It was not long before they passed the sands and reached the rocky country belonging to the gnomes, but they were still a long way from the entrance to the underground caverns in which lived the Nome King. There was a dim path winding between stones and boulders over which the walking was quite difficult, especially as the path led up hills that were small mountains, and then down steep and abrupt slopes where any misstep would mean a broken leg. Therefore it was the second day of their journey before they climbed halfway up a rugged mountain and found themselves at the entrance of the Nome King's caverns. On their arrival, the entrance seemed free and unguarded, but Goose and Cor had been there before, and they were too wise to attempt to enter without announcing themselves, for the passage to the caves was full of traps and pitfalls. So King Ghost stood still and shouted, and in an instant they were surrounded by a group of crooked gnomes, who seemed to have sprung from the ground. One of these had very long ears, and was called the Long-Eared Hearer. He said, "I heard you coming early this morning." Another had eyes that looked in different directions at the same time, and were curiously bright and penetrating. He could look over a hill or around a corner, and was called the Lookout. Said he, "I saw you coming yesterday." "Then," said King Ghost, "perhaps King Calico is expecting us." "It is true," replied another gnome, who wore a gold collar around his neck and carried a bunch of golden keys. "The mighty Gnome King expects you and bids you follow me to his presence." With this he led the way into the caverns, and Ghost and Core followed, dragging their weary prisoners with them, for poor King Kitticut and his gentle queen had been obliged to carry, all through the tedious journey, the bags of gold and jewels which were to bribe the Gnome King to accept them as slaves. Through several long passages the guide led them, and at last they entered a small cavern which was beautifully decorated and set with rare jewels that flashed from every part of the wall, floor, and ceiling. This was a waiting room for visitors, and there their guide left them while he went to inform King Calico of their arrival. Before long they were ushered into a great domed chamber, cut from the solid rock, and so magnificent that all of them, the King and Queen of Pingaree and the King and Queen of Regos and Corygos, drew long breaths of astonishment, and opened their eyes as wide as they could. In an ivory throne sat a little round man, who had a pointed beard and hair that rose to the tall curl on the top of his head. He was dressed in silken robes, richly embroidered, which had large buttons of cut rubies. On his head was a diamond crown, and in his hand he held a golden scepter with a big jeweled ball at one end of it. This was Calico, the king and ruler of all the gnomes. He nodded pleasantly enough to his visitors, and said in a cheery voice, "Well, your majesties, what can I do for you?" "It is my desire," answered King Ghost respectfully, "to place in your care 2 prisoners, whom you now see before you. They must be carefully guarded to prevent them from escaping, for they have the cunning of foxes, and are not to be trusted. In return for the favor I am asking you to grant, I have brought your majesty valuable presents of gold and precious gems." One moment. If you guys would like to fight, you're welcome to go to bed. Especially you who was causing the trouble by trying to steal his sister's blanket. Would you like to go to bed? Knock it off. Thank you. Sometimes I have to parent the abusers. I have to parent my own abusers. That seems wrong, doesn't it? And yet, here we are.
I'm the nice abuser, child.
They're all abusers. He then commanded Kitticut and Garee to lay before the Gnome King the bags of gold and jewels, and they obeyed, being helpless. "Very good," said King Calico, nodding approval, for like all the gnomes he loved treasures of gold and jewels. "But who are the prisoners you have brought here, and why do you place them in my charge instead of guarding them yourself? They seem gentle enough, I'm sure." "The prisoners," returned King Ghost, "are the King and Queen of Pingaree, a small island north of here. They are very evil people, and came to our islands of Regos and Corygos to conquer them and slay our poor people. Also, they intended to plunder us of all our riches, but by good fortune we were able to defeat and capture them. However, they have a son who is a terrible wizard, and who by magic art is trying to find the awful King and Queen of Pingaree. Set them free, and they may continue their wicked deeds. Therefore, as we have no magic to defend ourselves with, we have brought the prisoners to you for safekeeping." "Your Majesty," spoke up King Kitticut, addressing the Gnome King with great indignation, "do not believe this tale. I implore you, it is all a lie." "I know it," said Calico. "I consider it a clever lie, though, because it is woven without a thread of truth. However, that is none of my business. The fact remains that my good friend King Ghost wishes to put you in my underground caverns, so that you will be unable to escape, and why should I not please him in this little matter? Ghost is a mighty king and great warrior. while your island of Pingaree is desolated and your people scattered. In my heart, King Kitticut, I sympathize with you, but as a matter of business policy, we powerful kings must stand together and trample the weaker ones under our feet. King Kitticut was surprised to find the King of Gnomes so candid and so well informed, and he tried to argue that he and his gentle wife did not deserve their cruel fate, and that it would be wiser for Calico to side with them than with the evil King of Regos. But Calico only shook his head and smiled, saying, "The fact that you are a prisoner, my poor Kitticut, is evidence that you are weaker than King Gos, and I prefer to deal with the strong. By the way," he added, turning to the King of Regos, "have these prisoners any connection with the land of Oz?" "Why do you ask?" said Gos. "Because I dare not offend the Oz people," was the reply. "I am very powerful, as you know, but Ozma of Oz is far more powerful than I. Therefore, if this King and Queen of Pingaree happened to be under Ozma's protection, I would have nothing to do with them." "I assure your Majesty that the prisoners have nothing to do with the Oz people," Gos hastened to say, and Kitticut, being questioned, admitted that this was true. "But how about that wizard you mentioned?" asked the Gnome King. "Oh, he is merely a boy, but he is very ferocious and obstinate. He is assisted by a fat little sorcerer called Rinkitink and a talking goat." "Oh, a talking goat, you say? That certainly sounds like magic, and it also sounds like the land of Oz, where all the animals talk," said Calico with a doubtful expression. "What's going on?"
Your son is misbehaving.
Okay, go to bed. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll try again tomorrow. I already warned you once. I said if you do it again, you can go to bed. Now you can go to bed. See how that works? I don't lie. If I say do it again, you go to bed. Then you do it again, you go to bed. I'm sorry, but that's good. Good night. I love you. I'll see you in the morning. But King Gos assured him the talking goat had never been to Oz. "As for Rinkitink, whom you call a sorcerer," continued the Gnome King, "he is a neighbor of mine, you must know. But as we are cut off from one another by high mountains beneath which a powerful river runs, I have never yet met King Rinkitink, but I have heard of him, and from all reports he is a jolly rogue and perfectly harmless. However, in spite of your false statements and misrepresentations, I will earn the treasure you have brought me by keeping your prisoners safe in my caverns." "Make them work," advised Queen Kor. "They are rather delicate, and to make them work will make them suffer delightfully." "I'll do as I please about that," said the Gnome King sternly. "Be content that I agree to keep them safe." The bargain being thus made and concluded, Calico first examined the gold and jewels, and then sent it away to his royal storehouse, which was well filled with like treasure. Next, the captives were sent away in charge of the gnome with the golden collar and keys, whose name was Click, and he escorted them to a small cavern and gave them a good supper. "I shall lock your door," said Click, "so there is no need of your wearing those heavy chains any longer." He therefore removed the chains and left King Kitticut and his queen alone. This was the first time since the Northmen had carried them along together and free of all bonds. This was the first time since the Northmen had carried them away from Pingaree that the good king and queen had been alone together and free of all bonds. And as they embraced lovingly and mingled their tears over the sad fate, they were also grateful they had been passed from the control of the heartless King Gos into the more considerate care of King Calico. They were still captives, but they believed they would be happier in the underground caverns of the gnomes than in Regos and Corygos. Meantime, in the king's royal cavern, a great feast had been spread. King Gos and Queen Kor, having triumphed in their plot, were so well pleased that they held high revelry with the jolly Gnome King until a late hour that night. And the next morning, having cautioned Calico not to release the prisoners under any consideration without their orders, the king and queen of Regos and Corygos left the caverns of the gnomes to return to the shore of the ocean, where they had left their boat. And that is the end of chapter 17, The Gnome King. Tomorrow night we're going to read chapter 18, which has a mildly concerning title. Chapter 18 is entitled, Inga Parts with His Pink Pearl. I don't like that. Pink pearl is what keeps everyone from killing him. I feel like you should keep that.
Bye.
Especially as he's about to go fight some gnomes, presumably. I have concerns. But we'll find out everything we need to know tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, Facebook, when we read Chapter 18, Inga parts with his pink pearl. I do hope you'll join us then. Good night, everyone.